The expectation was clear before anything happened. Those present believed they understood how Che Guevara would respond. The situation suggested a familiar pattern. Pressure would lead to anger would lead to confrontation, and confrontation would confirm what everyone already believed. This assumption did not come from hostility. It came from habit. Che had been observed, discussed, and categorized repeatedly. His reputation preceded him, and that reputation shaped what people anticipated from him in moments of tension. Anger was not just expected, it was assumed. The environment reinforced this belief. The setting was controlled, public enough to discourage disruption, and structured in a way that favored authority. In such spaces, reactions tend to follow predictable lines. People raise their voices. They argue. They resist verbally when physical resistance is not an option. Che was expected to do the same. Before the moment unfolded, he did nothing to contradict this expectation. He did not signal restraint, nor did he signal defiance. His posture was neutral. His expression gave nothing away. This neutrality was interpreted as build-up rather than calculation. Those watching believed they were waiting for an outburst. The anticipation itself created tension. Conversations slowed. Attention narrowed. People prepared themselves not to prevent anger, but to manage it once it appeared. This preparation shaped perception. When people expect a specific reaction, they become less attentive to alternatives. They watch for confirmation rather than observation. Anything that does not match expectation initially goes unnoticed. Che understood this dynamic. He did not challenge it. He allowed the expectation to solidify. By doing so, he ensured that when he acted, the contrast would be unmistakable. The belief that anger was inevitable also affected how authority positioned itself. Measures were taken not to de-escalate, but to contain. This posture left little room for interpretation. Either Che would react as expected, or he would surprise everyone. What no one anticipated was the absence of reaction. They were prepared to respond to anger, not to restraint. This imbalance mattered. Systems designed to handle confrontation often fail when confronted with calm. As the moment approached, the room settled into a quiet readiness. The silence before action was not peaceful. It was anticipatory. People were not listening. They were waiting. Che did not rush to fill that silence. He allowed it to deepen. The longer the expectation held, the more powerful its collapse would be. When the moment finally arrived, it did not resemble what had been prepared for. There was no raised voice, no accusation, no visible challenge. What Che did instead disrupted not authority, but assumption. The absence of anger created confusion. People momentarily lost the framework they were relying on. Without anger to respond to, they were left without instruction. The system hesitated. That hesitation was the beginning of silence. In the next part, we will examine what Che did instead of reacting with anger, why restraint proved more disruptive than confrontation, and how the room adjusted when the expected response never arrived. When Che Guevara finally responded, it was not with the emotion everyone had prepared for. There was no raised voice, no sharp gesture, and no attempt to seize control of the situation through confrontation. What he did was quieter, and therefore more disruptive. Che chose restraint. This choice immediately exposed a flaw in the environment. The structure surrounding him was designed to absorb anger, not calm. Authority had prepared to manage resistance, not composure. By refusing to react emotionally, Che forced those present to operate outside their expectations. His response was deliberate. He did not withdraw and he did not submit. He remained present, attentive, and controlled. This posture made it difficult to categorize his behavior. He was neither compliant nor defiant in the conventional sense. That ambiguity mattered. People rely on clear signals to determine how to respond. Anger signals confrontation. Silence signals uncertainty. Che's restraint removed the signal entirely. Without it, the room lost its rhythm. No one knew whether to escalate, de-escalate, or intervene. The response also disrupted hierarchy. In structured environments, authority often asserts itself by reacting to visible challenge. When no challenge appears, authority must decide whether to act anyway. Acting without provocation risks appearing excessive. Waiting risks appearing uncertain. Che understood this balance. By staying calm, he shifted the burden of action onto others. He did not force a confrontation. He invited hesitation. Hesitation became silence. Importantly, Che did not use silence as avoidance. He remained engaged. His body language indicated awareness, not withdrawal. This distinction prevented others from interpreting his behavior as weakness. Those present later described the moment as unsettling. Not because anything threatening occurred, but because nothing did. The absence of reaction disrupted their sense of control. Calm became unpredictable. This unpredictability explains why no one spoke. Any verbal response would have required framing Che's behavior as something it was not. Without anger to respond to, words felt unnecessary and potentially revealing. Che's restraint also prevented escalation. There was no justification for force, no reason to intervene aggressively. The system stalled, waiting for a trigger that never came. As seconds passed, silence acquired weight. What began as hesitation hardened into acknowledgement. The room adjusted to the new reality. The expected reaction would not arrive. Che did not fill the silence. He allowed it to stand. By doing so, he ensured that the moment would define itself rather than be explained away. Explanation reduces impact. Silence preserves it. This response did not change outcomes or reverse authority. It changed perception. Those present recalibrated their understanding of Che. He was no longer the figure they had prepared for. He had become something less predictable, and therefore more difficult to manage. The power of the moment lay not in dominance, but in disruption. Che disrupted expectation without issuing challenge. He demonstrated that anger was not inevitable, and that restraint could be more destabilizing than resistance. In the next part, we will examine how the silence spread through the room, how others reacted internally even if they said nothing, and why the moment lingered long after it ended. The silence did not arrive all at once. It spread gradually, moving through the room as individuals adjusted internally before anything changed outwardly. Silence is rarely collective at first. It begins as private hesitation, then becomes shared restraint. After Che Guevara chose not to react with anger, the first response from others was not confusion, but delay. People paused, waiting for the expected escalation to resume. When it did not, attention sharpened. This pause mattered. In structured environments, pauses signal uncertainty. Uncertainty forces reassessment. Those present began reviewing the situation in real time, recalculating what Che's restraint meant for their own position. Some interpreted his calm as strategy. Others saw it as defiance expressed without words. A few considered whether they had misjudged the moment entirely. These interpretations differed, but they shared a common result. No one felt confident enough to speak. Speech requires clarity. Silence emerges when clarity disappears. Che did not exploit this uncertainty with movement or words. He remained still. His posture communicated awareness rather than withdrawal. This steadiness prevented others from dismissing his behavior as avoidance or shock. As seconds passed, the silence gained structure. What began as hesitation solidified into restraint. People who might have spoken early chose not to interrupt. Those who might have followed waited for direction that never came. The room adjusted its behavior around Che's calm. Authority figures hesitated to assert control without provocation. Intervening would have required justification, and none was available. Acting in the absence of anger risked appearing excessive. This risk mattered. Authority often depends not on force, but on perception. Acting without cause undermines legitimacy. Che's restraint removed the cause. Silence therefore became the safest option for everyone involved. It protected authority from overreach and protected observers from miscalculation. No one spoke because speaking introduced risk. Che understood this dynamic. He allowed the silence to do its work. He did not seek to dominate the room. He allowed the room to recognize its own hesitation. This recognition altered the atmosphere. The earlier expectation of anger had organized behavior. With that expectation gone, behavior became cautious. Caution replaced confidence. Silence replaced instruction. What followed was subtle but lasting. The silence did not end with a signal or command. It dissolved slowly without resolution. When activity resumed, it did so differently. Conversations were quieter. Movements were more deliberate. Che had not gained authority in a formal sense. He had altered the environment. People now factored his unpredictability into their decisions. This shift did not require acknowledgement. It operated beneath the surface. Later accounts from those present rarely focused on what Che did. They focused on how the room felt afterward. This emphasis is revealing. The impact of the moment lay in its effect, not its action. Silence has a way of reframing memory. Without words to anchor the moment, recollections drift toward sensation rather than detail. People remembered the pause, the hesitation, the absence of response. Few could articulate why it happened. This inability to explain reinforced the moment's power. Events that can be easily narrated lose influence. Events that resist explanation persist. Che did not attempt to clarify or correct these memories. He did not speak about the moment afterward. By leaving it unaddressed, he allowed the silence to remain unresolved. Unresolved moments linger. The room eventually returned to function. Authority reasserted itself. Procedures continued. But something had shifted. Che was no longer approached with the same assumptions. Anger was no longer expected. Restraint had redefined him. This redefinition mattered not because it changed outcomes, but because it changed interaction. Che had demonstrated that expectation could be disrupted without confrontation. Silence had carried the message more effectively than words. In the final part, we will examine what remained after the silence faded, how this moment shaped Che's interactions moving forward, and why restraint, once demonstrated, cannot be unseen. When the silence finally dissolved, it did not disappear completely. It left a residue. Moments like this do not end cleanly. They settle into behavior, shaping how people act long after the immediate tension has passed. After Che Guevara chose restraint instead of anger, interactions around him subtly changed. No one referenced the moment directly. There was no acknowledgement, no commentary, and no attempt to interpret it aloud. Silence protected everyone from having to explain what they had just experienced. This protection mattered. Speaking about the moment would have required admitting misjudgment. It would have forced those present to confront how wrong their expectations had been. Silence allowed correction without embarrassment. Che did not seek to preserve the moment through repetition or emphasis. He did not remind others of it, nor did he behave as if it granted him leverage. His behavior returned to its prior rhythm. This return reinforced the impression that the moment had not been staged. It had emerged naturally. That naturalness gave it credibility. People recalibrated their expectations quietly. Che was no longer treated as someone whose reactions were predictable. This unpredictability did not make him threatening. It made him difficult to categorize. In structured environments, what cannot be categorized requires caution. This caution influenced how others spoke around him, how they interpreted his silence, and how they anticipated his responses. Anger was no longer assumed. Calm was no longer dismissed as weakness. Restraint had been redefined. The significance of this shift lies in its subtlety. Nothing dramatic followed. There was no confrontation, no reversal of authority, no public acknowledgement of change. The system absorbed the moment and adjusted internally. This is how many influential moments operate. They do not announce themselves as turning points. They alter behavior quietly, through reassessment rather than reaction. Che's choice did not change his circumstances in a measurable way. It did not alter outcomes or reverse decisions. What it changed was perception. Perception influences interaction, and interaction shapes experience. The silence that followed his restraint functioned as confirmation. It confirmed that anger was not inevitable. It confirmed that expectations could be wrong. And it confirmed that authority does not always respond well to calm. In historical accounts, moments like this are often overlooked. They leave no documents, no recordings, and no clear statements. Their impact must be inferred from behavior rather than evidence. This is why the moment endured. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was effective. Che demonstrated that restraint, applied at the right time, could disrupt certainty more deeply than confrontation. The lesson of this moment extends beyond Che. It reveals something about power, expectation, and response. Systems prepare for resistance. They are less prepared for calm. Che understood this. He did not need to oppose authority to unsettle it. He allowed authority to confront its own assumptions. Silence did the rest. What remained after the silence was not agreement or submission. It was awareness. And once awareness enters a room, it does not leave easily.